All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We've got another presenter coming, but she was staying in another hotel, so I don't know if she went the wrong way on the metro or what, but when she gets here, we'll do that. Her name's Susanna, so we can all sing "Oh, Susanna" when she walks in, and that might make her feel better or worse. I don't know. But I appreciate you all being here today. And we're talking about integrating history in Alabama, some case studies of some things we're doing in Alabama to really rediscover our history within archives and related organizations. By way of introduction, my name is Rebecca Davis. I'm the archivist at the Limestone County Archives in North Alabama on the I-65 corridor. Susanna Lieberman, I will introduce her when she comes in. Veronica Henderson is the archivist at the Alabama A&M University, which is a historically black university, and the State Black Archives, which is in Huntsville to my east. And then Dana Chandler is the archivist at Tuskegee University, a historically black university in South Alabama. Now, the problem in Alabama is very easily illustrated with these two photos. Separate and often unequal societies living side by side, but not the same. And these two pictures were both taken in 1911 in Limestone County, Alabama. The one on the left is the student body of Trinity School, which was the black school that was established to educate the freed slaves in 1865. The one on the right is the Ag School, which later became the all-white Athens High School until 1970 when it was desegregated. And this is some of the very affluent members of their senior class. This problem of segregation has played out in several ways, and to this day in Alabama, it's still playing out in certain ways. First of all is this historic and often well-founded mistrust on the part of the black community towards the record keepers. And there are some really good reasons for that. Jim Crow laws kept people illegals within their own communities in much the same way that immigration laws keep many Hispanics illegals within their own community. They're undocumented. They fly under the radar. They try to avoid public record keeping in any way, shape, or form. That's the way it was in the Jim Crow South. And within our own organizations, there were egregious examples of the willful destruction of, and purposeful exclusion of minorities' records from the public record. And we'll get into some examples of that too. And bias toward researchers, the black researchers who were attempting to discover and share that history. There is still segregation in our society. It's voluntary, but it's there. And the way it really plays out the most is in some of the most important areas of our life, which is faith and death. The churches and the funeral homes are still very highly segregated in Alabama by choice. So that faith and death, that encompasses a lot of your history and genealogy records. And in the past, there has been a lack of collaboration among individuals and organizations. We're all pretty fiercely independent in Alabama, and what happened in the past is that each archives and records area sort of became their own little island and didn't really work together. Now, the solutions that we have found and that we're working on and continue to work on in Alabama is a two-prong effort, the first of which is professional partnerships. And that is collaboration between archives on the national, state, and local levels, between universities and their archives, libraries, community organizations, people who all have the same like-minded mission to preserve and share our story, however that plays out. Cooperation between organizations and communities that historically were segregated, but now we're trying to work together and do these collaborative projects to preserve and share and tell our story in a way that the public that really resonates with the public. And the second prong of this effort is community outreach. And this is sort of a baby of mine because public history it's big, and if you don't believe in the importance of it, it's getting more and more important that we need to be reaching our communities. It's not just about metadata. It is about, are we taking the information to the people? Are we including them in what we're doing? Do they know why we matter? Do they know that we matter? And so to that end, we have special events to celebrate and share our history, education of the public, speaking engagements, public pleas through traditional media, television and newspapers and so on, and the social media, any kind of special events and tweets and posts and all of that. And the most time-consuming but the most rewarding is good old-fashioned word of mouth, building relationships, getting to know people face to face. The results of this effort across Alabama is that there are many previously hidden collections that are now accessible to the public and to researchers. And as a result, we've had an increased use of archives. Our patronage has really upped since we have started really reaching out and adding more of this information in. There has been more cooperation among individuals, organizations, and communities that are all involved with wanting to discover and share our history. There's been race relations, both past and present, that have revealed. Some of them are not always positive. Sometimes we get to see some negative things, but it is bringing to light some things that may have been hidden. And ultimately, there's been a renewed knowledge and understanding of our community history, which really expands to our state and national story. Now, in the Limestone County Archives, which is a local government archives, we find that we are now going back and retelling our hometown story. And the archives was established in 1980. It's one of the oldest county archives in the state. But we still, for the most part, we were pretty whitewashed. Our records were whitewashed. Everything was pretty white. And this is an example of it. I know y'all can't read that handwriting, but this is a photo from our records. And actually, this photo has never been assigned an accession number or anything. And I don't know if our prior archivist was just a little embarrassed of this or what, but it's sort of hidden away. But this is a picture of the little girl is Elizabeth Hobbs and the man is Henry Hobbs. And there's a couple of interesting things about this. Number one is there at the bottom you can see a line that separates two pedigrees. The one on the right is Elizabeth Hobbs' pedigree, taking her back to the founding fathers of our town. The one on the left is Henry Hobbs' pedigree, which says that he was the son of Billy the coachman, and on back to the son, said to be the son of a nigger king in Dahomey. And this is one of the way that this person who wrote, the family member who wrote this, was really considering herself to be quite complimentary of Henry Hobbs. And what she said about him was, and the reason she took this picture, few of the old-time faithful Negroes are left, and this picture is taken to preserve their memory in a day when there will be none. So as you can see, we have this very clearly shows we have two societies living side by side in the same place, but they're not the same, and they're not treated the same for sure. This problem of the past is played out in many ways, most obviously in segregated records. This picture that I have here is the marriage license from 1864 to 74 on the left, and the colored marriage license from 1864 to 74, 1869 to 74 on the right. Marriage records, school records, voter records, all segregated. Our school census records from the time have the white cards for the white children and the yellow colored cards for the colored children. Everything was separated. And so the community history, the story that was disseminated and told, was from the white perspective. From the government documents really documented white life in Limestone County. The newspapers, the history books that pulled from those records, all really documented white life. And minorities were actively harassed. So like I mentioned before, they learned to fly under the radar. You keep your story, your history in your family, in your church. You don't make it available at the government organization because there could be repercussions to that. Back in the day, if you really shared your family history and genealogy, it might not lead to the king in Dahomey. It might lead to the former plantation owner on whose family land you still live. And so people didn't necessarily, the leaders didn't necessarily want that out there. So minorities learned to fly under the radar. Even more recent history, some problems that we've had have been factions within the groups that were actually trying to preserve and tell the story. There were the Trinity School graduates. Trinity School closed due to desegregation in 1970, and some of the graduates reopened the building in the 80s to try to have a museum and archives there. Well, they got into a lawsuit over the records. And so as a result, some of the records went into one storage facility. Some of them went to individuals who put them back in shoe boxes and in attics and in basements. And if those graduates died after that, who knows if those records are even still there, or if children said, I don't know what grandma kept, let's just chunk it. So those factions actually cause problems with keeping that record, that history record. And then within our own, within my own organization, Limestone County Archives was established in 1980. That's not that old. And yet our first archivist, when she was transcribing the census records, was purposely leaving off the black families until someone told on her, and her bosses, which I'll give credit to the good old boy commissioners who actually did say, no, you have to include everybody. And then even more recently, in the 90s, there was an assistant archivist who, when black families would come in bringing their family history files and genealogy, she would very politely, in her southern way, tell them thank you. And when they walked out the door, she would file them in File 13. So that was on the part of the ones who were charged with the responsibility of record keeping. Now, the present solution that we have found, and I promise there's only a couple pictures of me, but I had to share this because I was so excited. I had just done the happy dance when this book came in. This is the proof copy of Holding the Fort, the history of Trinity School in Athens, Alabama, 1865 to 70, to 1970, which is a really long title, but basically this is the culmination of I say the culmination, it's really the commencement of a project that I've become very closely involved with. The ALCA is the Athens Limestone Community Association, and it is a group of Trinity graduates and other interested community parties who are taking the old Trinity School, which has been empty for 30 years, and renovating it, reopening it as a community center to help provide continuing education to the public, job training, and also to eventually open a Trinity Museum and Archives that will document the history that will share the history of Trinity School and the community that surrounded it, which was pretty much the entire black community, because for a long time, that was the only place to get an education if you were black in Limestone County. And so to that end, we have published, I'm on the board, and we have published Holding the Fort that tells it's the first real comprehensive history of this school and its graduates and students. There are thousands of names in this book. It touches so much of Limestone County life. And I agreed to edit it, and by the time the project was over, I had edited it, published it, laid it out, designed it, and joined the board, and they made me the treasurer. So be careful about what you agree to do, because you may find out that you've bitten off more than you can chew. But this is a really crucial partnership for the Limestone County Archives, and I'm very excited. The sales of these books will help benefit the operations of the community center. Because I helped with that book, all the pictures that were used in the book, we now have copies of too, some originals. There will be another book that comes out where we'll be helping, closely involved with establishing the Trinity Museum and Archives, very much a collaborative effort in a way that has not been done in a really long time, if ever. We're also collaborating with the state black archives and other archives within the state to share our resources, and to know what we have. That's a big part of the third prong of professional partnerships. It's just knowing what we have. Knowing if a researcher comes to me and I don't have what they're looking for, just to be able to say, I don't have it, but let me send you to Veronica, because I know she has that information, or Dana does, or whoever, to be able to better direct people where we're going, what we're doing. Then the second, and I promise this is the last picture of me, but this is the second prong of the present solution, is community outreach. And this is an article that the local paper did about what we were doing back when we really just kind of got started. And the quote for me at the beginning, I didn't really know she was quoting me on this, but I said, most of our records are lily white. And that was really true. But they ran this article, and then some more news stations picked it up, and papers and things. And people started asking about it and bringing stuff in and utilizing social media and making public, going to churches, predominantly black churches, to say, hey, we want your things. Speaking to anybody who will listen. But most importantly, just building relationships. If there's one thing I can tell, if you're really trying to reach a hidden collection within your community, find an ally. Find somebody who trusts and believes in you and who other members of the community will trust them. Because there was a 94-year-old graduate of Trinity High School, her name's Miss Celestine Bridgeforth, who is sharp as a tack. And if I had knocked on her door, a 36-year-old white woman, and said, hey, let me have your picture, she probably would have slammed the door in my face and called the cops. But one of her friends took me to her, and I spent hours with her talking about, she named every single member of her kindergarten class of 1923 in a picture. I mean, that's how sharp she was. So, yay, Susanna's here. Everybody, I'm so happy you're here, Susanna. You're not late at all. We haven't even gotten to you. So, oh, Susanna, we're so glad you're here today. Okay, so trust is crucial. You have to build trust, and that can be undermined very quickly. The present results, this is one thing I'm really excited about. This funeral program of Bernice Lorene Oates Darby Brown is just one example. Before we started this effort, we had 0 black funeral records. The funeral homes are still highly segregated. The funeral home managers had not really worked with us in the past. People started coming. There are older ladies who have kept every funeral program for every funeral they've ever been to since 1952. And they would bring their bags and their boxes and their binders to us, and we'd scan them. And we have nearly 1,000 black funeral programs scanned now that we did not have that information. And they're chock full of historical and genealogical and biographical information and photos, just a priceless resource. The Trinity story and photos that was hidden in a storage room is now being made public. We are doing resource and exhibit sharing among area archives and museums and community organizations. We've had more people come to the Limestone County Archives and use our resources in person and online. And we have more people in the community involved in telling and sharing that story. Now, this is a challenge. And I'll get to that picture here in a minute. But the first challenge that we have in this effort is always what we all have: money, time, and staffing. When you get 1,000 black funeral programs in, it takes time to scan those in. We're adding them into our database, which will be available online, so they're searchable by names. That all takes time. Fortunately, when you do something that people really believe in, they want to get involved. So we've had more volunteers step up and help us. We also have the issue of determining what goes where. Some things that come to me don't really belong with me. It might belong in Madison County or at the State Black Archive. So we really need to determine the appropriate place. And a lot of that overlaps. And then there's this. We're getting more hand in hand with getting more documentation of the black community story. We're also getting more documentation of what they had to live with. And this is an example, a photo that was taken in the 70s. That is not the 1870s. This is the 1970s on the main highway in Athens, Alabama. They had a KKK rally and a cross burning. And our local photographer, news photographer, took this picture, had it printed this big, and gave it to one of our local lawyers who, he didn't know what to do with it. He stuck it in a closet. And a couple months ago, he said, hey, I thought you might want this picture. And I opened up, I was like, wow. So what do you do with this? I mean, obviously you don't frame it and hang it in the lobby, but not in my archives anyway. But you also don't shove it away and pretend it doesn't exist. And I'm going to quote from one of my favorite archivists, Susanna, who says, to pretend these things didn't happen is to take away the victory from those who had to overcome it. And that is so true. I think that really resonates with all of us as historians and record keepers, is that we want to preserve it all. We don't want to pretend history didn't happen. We don't want to whitewash history, but we do want to handle this appropriately. And so I sessioned it. It's in my collection. It's available to any researcher or anybody who needs to use it for what they're doing. It's also not framed. So we also have to watch attitudes. Older volunteers and patrons who grew up in a different time. When we were talking about needing some help scanning the African American funeral programs for the book, one of our older patrons said, "You mean the nigger funeral programs?" And we kind of cringed and said, "Well, we don't say that." And she said, this is the excuse we hear, "Well, I grew up side by side and played with them, and I always called them that." I said, well, that might have worked in 1934, but that doesn't work in 2014, Limestone County. Not only that, if you want to stand, it's a free country, I realize that. There's freedom of speech. If you want to stand in your front yard and holler the N-word all day long, that's your business. But if you are at the Limestone County Archives, if you are representing the Limestone County Archives as a volunteer or however, you don't use that word. That undermines the trust that we have worked so hard to build. And so we have to watch that. There's attitudes within history group factions, and honestly, I have to watch my own attitude. I feel like I'm super sensitive to race now. I don't want to become the accidental racist, and I don't want to look at people when they come in just by the color of their skin. But part of it is when you're dealing with segregated records, you kind of have to if you're going to help people find their family records. So you just kind of have to keep a check on yourself always and say, what is my motivation? What am I doing? Am I doing this for the right reasons? And finally, a plan for the future, because if we're going to deal with the past and the present, we better make a plan for the future. One thing I'm really excited about is exhibit sharing. We want to work with State Black Archives to, I know time. Okay, to have an exhibit featuring Trinity School and some other black schools, Archives to the South to build an exhibit on the Scottsboro boys, and more exhibits, special programs. There's another Trinity book coming out of pictures. We want to engage additional minority groups. Are we reaching out to the Hispanic community that's still highly undocumented? Ultimately, the plan is to continue to tell and retell the story as new, old stuff comes to light. And with that, I will pass to Susanna. Thank you.
Well, my name is Susanna Leberman, and I apologize for being late. There was a big wreck on Connecticut Avenue. I was hustling. I was like, I'll just run. So I'm here today to share with you this from a library perspective, a public library perspective. So Huntsville is known for its technology and being the home to Redstone Arsenal and NASA. After the Civil War, we welcomed Northern dollars for the textile industry. In the 40s and 50s, we welcomed the federal government and the Germans, former Nazis. So if you have money in Huntsville and you want to invest it, they don't really care who you are. Which leads us to Huntsville took down the signs of segregation out of the courthouse because the general said, we're going to cut your funding if you don't do it. So the business leaders of Huntsville got together and we started the segregation process. We became the first school system in the state to integrate public schools. Here you see Dr. Hereford and Sonny on their way to school that day. I asked him what he was thinking in this picture after grilling him in a way too long interview. And he said, I was thinking, how could everybody hate me so much? Because he was a doctor, and delivered babies and stuff. So basically, I'm just going to run through my program. It's going to be identifying and understanding our problem. We're not completely whitewashed. It's there. We just need to use it appropriately. What are we doing about our problem? Outreach, programming, talking to people. In the future, where do we see ourselves going? I really want to be provocative with this material. I want to get conversations started. And I want to move toward really past the idea of just diversity, more towards total inclusion and multiculturalism. So, identifying and understanding the problem. Well, like Rebecca pointed out, you can't really pretend that this big iron sign that says, welcome to Alabama, accept integrationalists and mongrelizers, doesn't exist. You can't pretend this big iron sign doesn't exist. So, like she said, if you do, then you're really robbing people of, what they overcame. So, how do we approach this? And I'll get back to this sign in a few minutes. So, like I said, we're not totally whitewashed. We've actually managed to collect a good sampling of African American history resources over the years. Art, the works of Howard Whedon were used in the costume design in Gone with the Wind. I've been working on tracing the genealogy of these people. We can find their names from letters and things that she referenced. So I've actually had a lot of practice in really digging into African American genealogy, and it's really hard. I had to learn from my mentor how to do it, and it's very difficult. So we've built up a lot of good resources for that. In developing portraits, in developing programming, I did the people behind the portraits of Maria Howard Whedon, and we can put that online. So it's also an online collection and exhibit that can be used in schools and things like that. We also feature the Rosenwald Schools of Madison County called Knock, and It Shall Be Opened. And I saw that in a handwritten pencil script on the back of one of the photographs, and I thought, man, that's beautiful. So that's what we named the exhibit. We have portraits. City directories are really good for this, and the city directories are segregated, and even if the names are integrated, they still have a C out beside it. So we've got genealogy, we've got African American literature, the religious histories of the various churches, which are often the central core to their communities. We've got information about African American businesses in the business district and the community as well. But even with all of this, I still feel like we're really not getting the whole story. We're really not preserving the whole cultural idea of the life in this community. So what are we going to do about it? Well, let's start a conversation and really get people talking. I started getting out into the community in various ways, going to churches, meetings, civic organizations. I started applying for traveling exhibits such as Lincoln, the Constitution, and the Civil War, which actually turned out to be pretty controversial. The Lincoln haters even found my lib guides. Like anybody even know that exists, right? But the Lincoln haters found it. Said, I'm not going to read this, but this is just one comment. I'm like, come on. And so this was really an eye-opener for me on how to deal with strong emotions, strong personalities of the public, really mediating and navigating the murky waters here. I amped it up with an exhibit commemorating 50 years of school integration. We called it On the Front Lines of History, Huntsville and the Civil Rights Movement. Right in the middle of this civil rights exhibit, I dropped in the KKK exhibit. And we brought the big iron sign down and stuck it right in the middle of everything and called the sub-exhibit Vile Voices of Resistance. So it's all about presentation and how you present this to people. We also had the civil rights leaders of Huntsville, a big grand opening. We were able to get politicians in there and school kids, and people were able to interact on the opening of this exhibit. And there's Dr. Hereford. The guest book it has been a really rich area of just little bits and pieces of things. This one lady wrote, I paid $15 to be able to vote and $4.50 for refusing to say yes and no ma'am to a white woman. Another commenter said, you still have a long way to go. However, the display is great. Thank you. So you can see that there's still relationships that need to be mended, and we still have more work to do. So I dove further. Pride and the Passion, the African American baseball experience. So this brings sports people in and rednecks and baseball enthusiasts. And so this is another way to bring people together under the guise of sports history, right? So again, we, just are integrating the programs into making it one cohesive thing. Another thing, I try to integrate these exhibits like Alabama and the Presidency, which features Alabamians who ran for president or has something to do with the presidency. And we were able to include, for example, Booker T. Washington, who was the presidential page for 3 presidents. Here he is with McKinley in Alabama. And so people really enjoyed that. As a result, we have received various new collections that I think are beginning to loosen up. It's not all just civil rights, and it's not all hatred and intensity. We're seeing more beautiful things, too, that really get to the the humanity of people, like what people like to listen to, what sheet music people collected. And so we have this beautiful new sheet music collection that's very large that I'm really excited about. We also have talks about the historically black business district and Church Street and the culture of that area. And we utilizing YouTube for these kinds of things. So again, people can access it from Google, and it can be used in smart classrooms and things like that. So we really want to just sit down and talk to people, talking to people as they come in and just listen to their stories. One patron wanted to see his name in the old city directory, so we looked up his family in the 1940 directory, and he began to tell me about all the different people on this one little bitty street, which no longer exists because it got torn down and burned during urban renewal. And he goes down through and he says, "Oh, Miss Sophie, she was my babysitter. I loved her." So I love things like that, and that's what I want to know about. So in many ways, we're still on the front lines of history. We're going to try to move towards a multicultural field. Huntsville's very international, so we want to be inclusive in a variety of ways. I think that if we could produce something tangible to show that we're working together, like a North Alabama catalog. So let's not segregate among our working professionals. Let's come together and create, I need to know what Veronica has. I need to know, what Rebecca has. And everybody knows what Dana has. It's going to be so awesome. We really want to come together and produce something tangible that we can, whether it be a portal, that we can update and point people to. So I think that if we provoke people into thinking and control them like the Lincoln haters, rather than just forcing them to remember, like Miss Sophie, remembering Miss Sophie, that's an experience. I think that if we go past memorization, it makes us more relevant in people's lives. And that's going to be a better approach, in my opinion, altogether, because it hits so many check marks. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? Great. Well, thank you again for having us this morning. I am Veronica Henderson, the head of Archives and Special Collections at Alabama A&M University, and also in transition for the State Black Archives Research Center Museum, also at Alabama A&M University. Right now, we are in a process of rediscovering our history at Alabama A&M. Specifically, since I am the one librarian that has been in place as the head of archives for the past 2 years, we're really trying to discover what it is we have in our collections. That's something that has been there. We have things that have been processed. We have things that are not processed. We have not physically gone through and cataloged each item or accessioned each item. We don't even have finding aids for our collection. So we are really in a whirlwind right now. So we have in our collection some items from Trenholm High School. Trenholm High School, as you see, was the All-Black Center of Education in Tuscumbia, Alabama, which is about an hour and a half west of Huntsville, still in the northern part of the state. After desegregation ended, the school closed, was torn down, and of course from there the artifacts that belonged to the school or to the community were dispersed amongst hundreds, if not thousands of people. Fred Johnson was the last principal at this location, and he brought some of the items to our university in about 1970 for us to hold, to take care of. Now, was there an agreement? Was there any transfer of ownership? We don't have record of that. I couldn't even tell you when our archives was established. Our university is 100 years old, well, actually over 100 years old, and at the time that he transferred this information or these items over to us, we had probably just gone through 105 years celebrating of our university's status. In fall of 2013, a few of the graduates and a few of the family members of people who went to the school had come and said, we've used these items before in our parade, or, because we have a biannual reunion, we'd like to use them again. I said, well, let me talk to our director and let's see exactly where we need to go from here. Well, a few months later, they wanted them back. We want them back. It has nothing to do with Alabama A&M University. You have plenty of stuff, and you don't know what this means to us. I do know what it means to them because we are a black university, and contrary to their belief and their opinion, Trentham High School and Alabama A&M are almost synonymous. The man who was one of the first principals, I think he was like the third principal, G.W. Trentham, the school who it's named for, was actually a friend of William Hooper Council, who was the founder of the university. So there's a connection there. And on top of that, a lot of the people who came from Trentham High School, as far as the high school graduates, they ended up as students at Alabama A&M University. So your history is linked, and it will forever be that way. So I said what it is what it is, and it's definitely not replevin. We don't have to just give things back. And we really have gone overboard. I had several conversations with one of the alumni, and she was fervent. She was, excuse me for saying, she was a little pissed off because I wouldn't give her the stuff back. And you just don't know, and you guys keep it in the basement. I said, ma'am, have you been here to A&M in the past 10, 15 years? That doesn't make a difference. Archives is on the third floor. And we had a case, a wooden case that was donated, and it said class of 1956 or something like that on it. And inside of the case were artifacts. On the upper right-hand side is a football trophy. That's when they won the state championship or their regional championship. That's a basketball jersey. And then there's a yearbook. These are some of the items that we do have in this case, and the case is even theirs, technically. But I have volunteered and said, you know, what we can do as opposed to giving it back, give me an opportunity to get the equipment that I need to, one, be able to photograph these artifacts in a 3D manner. Let me put them on a disc for you. And if I think it's Drexler High School, which is also in Tuscumbia, which is an all-white school that once it was segregated, like we've all already said, pretty much they created a room and wrote a grant and everything, got this room decorated for Trentham artifacts, but you didn't include us in the process. You knew we had your items, didn't include us. So we can't just give them back. But I can make a way for you to have access to them. So I've even been contacted by the superintendent of Tuscumbia City Schools, had a letter and everything, but I explained to her what it is I was willing to do, and she was okay with that. They left it alone, at least until they contacted our legal department and really were starting to go back and forth. So right now it's still in limbo, and that is where we stand as far as what we have that belongs to someone else that is a cultural artifact, and it means something to both of us. It's not just what's mine or what's yours. Like I said earlier, I'm also sort of transitioning with the State Black Archives Research Center and Museum, also that is located on our campus. Back in 1989, 87, something thereof, the state legislature basically decreed that the State Black Archives Research Center and Museum will serve as a repository of African-American, or Afro-American historic artifacts. That was in 1989. A&M will serve as the site of this repository. A&M will, or African-American history and culture will be acquired, preserved, circulated for research, education, and cultural purposes. I'm reading it for those in the back that can't see. And by doing this collection and making sure that things are accessible, this will thereby encourage inspiration and positive self-concepts on part of black Americans and provide a basis for whites to gain greater respect for the black race. Now, if that doesn't sound a little charged and a little ignorant, I don't know what does. Because I would never have put it in here and said, okay, well, this is for whites to gain a respect for us, and then this is for blacks to learn more about themselves. It's for all people. It should be accessible for everyone. So in the Black Archives, because this building is actually 102 years old, it had to go through renovations at the time. So in 1990, the site actually officially opened. We had items, I still don't know how we got them, that pertain to Buffalo Soldiers. Now, if you know what the Buffalo, or who the Buffalo Soldiers were, I don't have to go any further. But just for those who don't know, the Buffalo Soldiers were, of course, post-Civil War era, they were the colored regimental troops for the United States Army. And you had them both on horseback, and of course you had them, horseback? That was cavalry. Yeah, that was mainly cavalry, 9th and 10th Cavalry. I couldn't figure out how the hell this related to Alabama. And it was like, okay, so the Buffalo Soldiers in the ignoble mission. What's the ignoble mission? Do people even know what ignoble means? No. So I tried and I tried to figure out how I can connect the two. Well, the Buffalo Soldiers do have something to do with the state of Alabama. They directly have something to do with the city of Huntsville. Anyway, so this really kind of goes back to, are we really collecting the African American cultural artifacts as they pertain to the life and history and times of the state of Alabama? And based on just how this exhibit looked at this time, no. There was no real connection made. We just had stuff up about Buffalo Soldiers, stuff you could buy online, stuff you could buy at your, local art store. Okay, that's it. We've upgraded. We actually have a monument. We have I think the only monument east of the Mississippi River that is located about a couple miles from Alabama A&M that recognizes the Buffalo Soldiers and their time in Huntsville, Alabama. So we not only created a room, an exhibit with reader rails and other ephemeral material, but we tried to make sure we drew the connection to Alabama and the Buffalo Soldiers. And that's something that's really hard to do. I mean, I lived and breathed Buffalo Soldiers literally for 4 months. I could tell you the history from top to bottom. I can tell you that Camp Albert G. Force was where they were encamped in Huntsville when they were decommissioned from the Cuban-American War, Spanish-American War. I can tell you that. There's a song that I could sing from top to bottom, do the little dance moves and everything. I can give it to you if you want it, but I'm not going to do that today. But no, I'm not going to do that. But if anything, I did make sure that we connected Huntsville and we connected the African American experience, and we connected some piece of history that affects everyone. And the only artifact that we had was a hat that someone found on their farm. He was tilling one day and found it like in the early 2000s. And it's a period hat. It has a period insignia and pins and everything on it. So I feel pretty confident that this is something that a man who was part of this group actually wore, or when he retired in the state of Alabama. So ultimately, like you've heard before, we're trying to make those connections. We're trying to forge some type of professional partnerships between not only the community, so that would be Rebecca, that would be Susanna, but also with the historically black colleges. We are an 1890 land-grant institution. That was the Second Morrill Act of 1890. Tuskegee came behind us. We were the first in Alabama. They were the second. So, sorry. But because of things like this and because of issues that affect us as a whole in the state of Alabama, it is important, it is pertinent that we do connect on this level and make sure that we continue to find ways of enhancing the collections that we do or don't have. There is the Scottsboro Boys traveling exhibit. You've heard of the Scottsboro Boys. If you've all been to the museums and while you've been here, you've seen that. A little piece of our history, which affected northern Alabama. So that is something that we're trying to do. Rebecca's trying to make sure that we try to get some access to things that affect northern Alabama in the state black archives. And that's what's going to continue to drive us and foster these good relationships. So that is all I have for you. So I'll turn it over to Dana.
Thank you.
Yeah, I saw that. Our archives at Tuskegee University is 110 years old as of September 1st this year. 110 years old. And that archives is an amazing one, to say the least. We've been very fortunate to build the relationships with our colleagues in North Alabama, but also with Central Alabama. Unlike some states, the state of Alabama, our archivists know each other, and we know each other's collections. We're always referring each other to our other institutions, and in particular, through the leadership of the Alabama Department of Archives and History. I'm going to give them a plug because they deserve it for all the things they've done. I'm going to be talking today about our particular aspect at Tuskegee University, which is Saving the Future, Keeping and Retrieving Collections. Now, we've talked a lot about some of the things that have been going on in these other institutions, but I want to talk specifically about what we've been able to accomplish, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but if I do, okay. I'm going back to Alabama.
He used the N word and put up a cross burning. I think we crossed that road a long time ago.
We, of course, as they've already pointed out, reaching out to organizations and individuals has helped us to increase our holdings at Tuskegee University. As of this moment, we have 600 historically significant collections within our archives. Just knowing what we have has been very instrumental in keeping and maintaining our collections. And during that time, we found a lot of things that are missing. And we've sought to retrieve those things. And I'm going to talk about one collection in particular in just a few minutes. This action on our part has reassured and comforted our patrons and our supporters and the administration of our university. Actively looking within and processing what we have has revealed many exciting materials that have remained hidden for many years. I like to think of and I've got a term for it, exciting Thursdays, because it seems like every Thursday we're finding something new and exciting in our archives. And what these things have done is they've provided scholars with new perspectives on a variety of topics. I want to talk about three particular collections. The Retrieved Collection, the Booker T. Washington microfilm. The Revealed Collection, the Papers of the Southern Courier. And the Hidden Collection, the George Washington Carver notebooks. Let me give you a little background. In 1943, the United States Library of Congress raped the HBCUs. Can I use that word?
Yeah.
I can? Okay. And it's at that time that they removed from Tuskegee University, with the agreement of Tuskegee University's administration, what is commonly called the Booker T. Washington Collection. And it's not the Booker T. Washington Collection. It drives me nuts. It's the early records of Tuskegee University. I took the job in 2007. When I got to the archives, I noticed that we had 155 boxes of Booker T. Washington material. Where are the rest of the papers? Now, I was looking for the early records of Tuskegee University. So in 2009, I contacted the Library of Congress, and I said, I want to know more about the collection. I had looked at the finding aid that they produced, a very nice finding aid they produced. And I said, well, you still owe us something. They said, what? I said, the agreement that I have found a copy of says that you owe us a set of microfilms, and you've owed us that since 1943. Boy, they don't like me over there.
That's where we're going for the reset.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what's going to happen when I get over there. Somebody might be planning some sort of attack. Anyway. So here's what happened. It cost them a lot of money, probably a lot more money than that reception is going to cost us. The agreement specifically says this, that they are going to give us a copy of the microfilm of the collection for the collection. So I visited the Library of Congress during the last SAA conference here in D.C., 2010. I was not happily received. In fact, the woman I was supposed to meet with, she was walking out the door when I was walking in the door. If I hadn't said something to the guard there, I would have missed her and then missed my opportunity. So why did I go? I went there in order to see the collection. Now, normally if you do research on the Booker T. Washington collection in the Library of Congress archives, you look at the microfilms. I said, I don't want to see the microfilms. I'm from Tuskegee. I want to see the boxes. It doesn't look like they've done anything to those boxes since they got them. It doesn't. Those boxes are in the same state as the 155 boxes that I have at Tuskegee. In fact, we've reprocessed that 155 boxes at Tuskegee now, and ours looks better than theirs. So I asked them for our microfilm. After 2 years, we received the microfilm back at a cost of approximately $69,000 to the Library of Congress. Now, as an archivist, hey, I can retire, but I really did accomplish something. And what I've accomplished is this. The Library of Congress knew that if they gave us that set of microfilms, you see, what happens is we become a one-stop source for information about Booker T. Washington, because we have 155 boxes and 2 other collections that they don't have in theirs. So if you want to do any work on Tuskegee, anything involved with Tuskegee in its early days, you have to come to Tuskegee University. One more thing. The Library of Congress contended that they maintained the copyright because Booker T. Washington's granddaughter gave it to them in 1969. I retorted in a letter, how can you give something that doesn't belong to you? She couldn't give the copyright to the Library of Congress because it wasn't the Booker T. Washington papers. And if they wanted to know, I included 3 photographs I taken from Box 100, Box 700, and Box 900, where letters were addressed to the principal of Tuskegee University. They were not private papers. They were papers of the university. The reveal collection I want to talk to you about is the papers of the Southern Courier. In April of 2006, journalists who had worked at the Courier gathered in Montgomery, Alabama for a reunion. Where are our papers? That's what they asked. Where are our papers? They had been in Tuskegee University's archives, but they had not been processed. Now, this organization, the Southern Courier, was based in Montgomery, Alabama, and they worked during the Civil Rights Movement from July 1965 to December 1968. They were originally planned as a regional, nonprofit, independent newspaper. Its young staffers, who had come to Alabama from the Harvard Crimson to work, ranged in age from 19 to 23 and narrowed their efforts toward an almost exclusive Alabama audience. Now, what I have to show you was first revealed at the 2009 SALA meeting, the Society of Alabama Archivists, in Dothan, Alabama. The room was full when I first started talking about this. Since then, we've been able to find some more things that were placed in other boxes that I now am able to reveal. Some of the things that we find within those collections is this letter from one of the reporters. She says, I was forced to go out and warmly and charmingly steal. They used $32,000 in startup funds, received primarily from Eastern liberals. Eventually received grants from a variety of corporations and endowments, which aided with operating expenses. Austere measures during the entire time of the publication meant that staff members relied on help from home and often doubled as typesetters and printers. What I'm showing you are the background papers, the background collection of the newspaper. I've got maybe 6 or 7 copies of the Southern Courier in our collection. I don't need those. Those are all online. But I've got things that give you the background story, and it's an amazing story, to say the least. Many letters pointing out the difficulties and dangers that the reporters delivered and delivery people faced on a day-to-day basis. This particular letter right here has some really poignant comments. Some had to face mad dogs. They were beaten, sometimes very badly. I have a letter where one of the reporters was in Jackson, Mississippi, and he and his colleague were beaten very badly. It wasn't reported in the papers. Many times they were ridiculed, cursed, and spit upon. Some were threatened with death. But I haven't told you the whole story, have I? You see, these were young black and white kids working together for a common goal. Now, that's a story of Alabama that's not been told, has it? We always think of Alabama. You think of us as, oh, those rednecks. Well, there's a lot more to Alabama than just that. Not everyone can respond. This is a very poignant letter that I found just recently. This person writes and says, each week I am anxiously awaiting. Please don't think that people are not proud because they do not respond. We want to know about our people. We want to know what is going on. With the Courier, we can, for the first time, know. Now that's for a researcher, for an archivist, for a historian. Those are words that send chills down your spine. These are people that are telling us their innermost thoughts about what's going on at that time. This is a letter. It's received from a judge. And he addresses his letter to the Courier and says, my hopes once more became exalted, and my belief in the ultimate triumph of the good conscience of mankind was restored because of the work of the Southern Courier. and how the Courier affected Alabamians. I was stunned, this letter says, the minimal effect on Washington this news had, minimal effect on the Alabama State House. It is one of the best, expletive deleted, things that, I'm unlike the rest of them, I'll just delete that expletive, things that ever happened to Alabama, and you can be proud that you did something worthwhile. And you know, when you read these words, you feel this way. Sometimes I wish I could say the same, just like he said here in his letter. I wished I could say the same. After 3 tumultuous years, the Southern Courier came to an end in December of 1968 due to funding shortfalls. Many of the staff had continued to work until the last paper was printed with little or no financial assistance. The paper's influence led to many localized newsletters, thereby assisting in a grassroots campaign for racial equality. The materials remain in Tuskegee University archives. I have yet to have anybody come to truly mine that collection. George Washington Carver, the Washington Carver Notebooks. 1961, the Central Division of the National Park Service, based out in Missouri, Springfield, sent out a group from the University of Missouri to search out the scientific contributions of George Washington Carver. In their report, which was supposed to be unpublished, but you know what? Every library has a copy of this. Here's what they said. He did not make any great scientific discoveries, nor did he further scientific knowledge to any great extent. That was their conclusion. That is the conclusion that I have read in every one of the biographies about George Washington Carver. And it's supposed to be an honest reappraisal of George Washington Carver. However, recent findings within the Tuskegee University archives dispel such claims. We found 6 notebooks containing Carver's experiments, drawings, and observations. And these are the notebooks. Now, let me tell you the story. The rest of the story. There's the rest of the story. And I've got 3 minutes to tell you. But I'm not going to talk fast. Because I think this story is very interesting. You see, what happened is, when those people came to Tuskegee to do the research about George Washington Carver, they visited with the 3 people they thought might have information that would help them in writing their report. One of them said, I've got a few newspaper articles. The other says, I've got a few of the bulletins. The other one said, well, you know, I've got a few things that he's written. You see, they didn't get to talk to the 4th person. She was on vacation. Yeah. We know for a fact. She was sent on vacation. You see, they said, we're coming down, and we're the government, and we're coming down to do this story about George Washington Carver. We're going to check him out, see if he was truly a scientist. So what they did was, they hid the notebooks. And they remained hidden for 50 years. 50 years. That's what's inside the notebooks. Check it out. I mean, they're inundated with these beautiful drawings. This is one of my favorites, and that's a tomato. Anybody, if you can see it, it's a tomato. It's amazing what's in there. The experiments that he did. And there were many of them. The conclusion? George Washington Carver was indeed a scientist. Now I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. As an archivist, I'm also a censor. I'm waiting for the right person to come to visit me, because I want this material to be spread by the right person. Now I'm going to ask every one of you a question. Can you name one African American that's written a biography of George Washington Carver? No, you can't. An African American that's written a biography of Booker T. Washington? No, you can't. That's a shame. That is a shame. So, my key to all of this that we've just witnessed today, know your collections. Know your collections. It's not a number. It's not some obscure number that you put online and everything. Know your collections. Okay? You got to know the relationships between those collections. And you've got to know the relationship of those collections with the collections here, 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 there, so that you can help the researchers get the truth out. And isn't that what we're all about as archivists? You know, we turn it into making numbers and metadata and all this. Come on! We're about bringing the truth out to the public. That's our responsibility as archivists. And we forget that sometimes. Thank you.
We were going to take some time for questions and answers, but I think we all waxed a little eloquent. Maybe we just talked too slow. We are from Alabama. But if you got to go, that's fine. If you want to stay, talk to us, ask questions, that's fine too. We so much appreciate you all being here today. Thank you so much.